Hi guys, my name is Amish Tripathi and I'm the director of the Nehru Center. The Nehru Center is the cultural wing of the Indian High Commission in the UK, and we've been in existence for many decades, and we organize wonderful events at this very auditorium, which is in Mayfair in central London. Sadly, as you can see, the auditorium is empty. It has been empty since we were all put into lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic. But what we Indians believe is that the other side of a crisis is an opportunity. And what we have done at the Nehru Center is moved all our events online. So now, if you attend our online events, every single seat is a VIP seat. Like you get a front row at our events. No trouble of parking, no trouble of traveling all the way. And most practically all the programs that we would do, like literary discussions and dance performances, musical performances. We are doing them all on our online channels. You can register at for our newsletter at our website nehrucenter.org.uk. You don't need to write them down; they will be displayed at the bottom of the screen. You can also come to our Facebook page, which is a verified page, the Nehru Center. You can follow updates on all our events on Twitter as well, the Nehru Center. That's also a verified account, or you can come to our YouTube channel. Again, the Nehru Center. We are nothing if not consistent. I hope you do come to our online channels and enjoy the events that we're putting up for you. Thank you so much for all your love and support. Namaste. Jai Hind.
Namaste, everyone, and welcome to this Pranayam Summit. We are diving deep into prana and pranayam, exploring the nuances of prana as accessed through and beyond the breath. This is a journey of curiosity, of humble learning, and of gratitude for the grace and the love of the divine that is accessible to us in every moment. I invite you just to close your eyes and to come into connection as we chant the Shanti mantra for learning. Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Vanatu Sahaviyam Sarvavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste again, and very, very grateful to have with us today Dr. Sundar Balasubramanian. Let me tell you a little bit about him. His work is really, really fascinating, and so is his journey. Dr. Sundar Balasubramanian is a cell biology researcher and the founder of Prana Science Institute. He is a yoga biology researcher, a pioneer in the area of research combining pranayama and salivary stimulation, He discovered yogic breathing promotes salivary secretion and it contains factors that are important for our healthy living. Growing up in Tamil Nadu, India, in a traditional yoga and Siddha medicine practicing family background, Dr. Balasubramanian went to Swami Chidbhavananda's Vivekananda College in India, where he further learned yoga, meditation, and kirtan practices. He's a member of the International Association of Yoga Therapists and the Integral Yoga Teachers Association, and a speaker at TEDx Charleston 2015. He has been traveling globally to speak and teach the richness of yogic breathing and pranayam as he understands it through his research studies. Dr. Balasubramanian, thank you for being here. We're really, really grateful to have you here.
Thank you, Mirabel. It's a great pleasure to be talking with you and with your audience and in the summit. We start with the Guru salutation. Om. தெளிவு குருவின் திருமேனி காண்டல் தெளிவு குருவின் திருநாமம் செப்பல் தெளிவு குருவின் திருவார்த்தை கேட்டல் தெளிவு குரு உரு சிந்தித்தல் தானே. Reverence to Saint Trimular and several other sitters. Start the session with the clarity of learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I felt like I was back home. It
Yes,
was
it is.
so beautiful. And I think beautiful for our audience also because we often associate yoga with only Sanskrit. And, just for us all to listen and understand and know that it's pervasive, whatever language is spoken in India, there is access. There is a lot of conversation nowadays about how this information was withheld because it was only in Sanskrit and only for Brahmins. And I think when you're sharing this, it's letting us all know and emphasize that yes, there might have been sections that were misappropriating or like keeping it from others, but it was always and is always accessible to everyone. So
Yes,
thank you for starting with that.
thank you. It's a wonderful beginning note. Yoga is for everyone. Yoga is uniting everyone, whether we are separated by any type of separation, any type of distinctions. Yoga is one, and all beings are one. That is the deep rooted sense of unity.
Yeah. I'm very curious about your journey. What made you decide to firstly connect, Tirumantiram or to even study it and then make this connection to pranayam and to cell biology and the salivary markers? Can you share a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, sure. So my journey really begins very early on in my childhood. The search for this particular knowledge and how do we understand this? This curiosity started much early on in my life because, like many of us, I had the opportunity to grow up in a family background that is traditionally practicing some of these methods. As you said, we speak the language Tamil. I was born in the family of Siddha medical practitioners, and we have plenty of practitioners in those days, and even now, and God willing, in the future also. There'll be plenty of Siddha practitioners in the family. And when I was growing up, I will be it's a big family always, like our street is a family, our village is a family, every house is a family, close family connection. So I had a lot of teachers, so to speak. One of the important ones that I would say is that when I was starting, when I was in 10th grade, my dad sent me to this uncle's clinic. It's a Siddha clinic, and he would make a lot of Siddha medicines. And that is where I came in very close contact with the formal Siddha medicine and formal learning of Siddha medicine. Even though we practice at home, my grandparents and other uncles also practice, but this is kind of the formalized introduction for me at that age. And we would be making, I'll be helping him make medicines. There are some medicines you had to grind for 48 hours, and me and my cousins would be grinding for during the day, and my uncle would do that in the night. So he will be that's a kind of the rigorous processes involved in making those siddha medicines. And pranayama is part of the medical practice. So Siddha medicine is not just the medicines that you take, it is a lifestyle. You go to the kitchen, so everything that you see is a medicinal herb or spices. So that's how Siddha medicine is kind of tightly connected with our life. And if you take chanting or ways of prayers, everything has the life in itself is kind of a lifestyle itself is connected with that. So I kind of grew up in that background, and I wanted to learn more about it. That's what my uncle used to say: learn chemistry, how things transform, how they react, how they work. So learn that. That is the most important thing that I still remember. That when I was getting ready to go to college, he was he was insisting. I was also very fascinated about chemistry, so I took chemistry for my bachelor's and biochemistry for my master's, because that's where the life comes in into chemistry. So uh, subsequently I did my PhD in biochemistry, kind of the question of how things work. And I'm very fascinated about the medicinal plants, the different phytochemicals, how what is the constituent of different plants and how they work, what are all the traditional folklore or the medicinal uses and ethnopharmacology of those medicinal plants. Those are my other areas. In fact, some of my PhD work is also from a medicinal plant. So these are all like kind of connecting me to the ancient traditional practice of Siddha medicine and associated practices. So even though I didn't have a chance to later continue my aspirations in medicinal plants, even though I time to time go to research something related to medicinal plants and compounds from it, but my other area, the yoga practice, we practice yoga, pranayama, and these practices kind of have been with me, and that is where I came across. I love literature, uh, very fond of Tamil literature, because I know I was living in Delhi for a year. I know a little bit of reading and writing Hindi, and in Vivekananda College, chanting is part of our learning process. So I know a lot of Sanskrit mantras. Um, I am like deeply fascinated about the literature, the Tamil literature, things that are said in that literature, very ancient philosophies, principles related to the Siddha medicine, especially the work of 18 Siddhars. There are like crores and crores of siddhars, but the 18 siddhars are the traditional, founding fathers, I would say, or who kind of formalized the Siddha medicine, Siddha philosophy. I was deeply involved in learning about them, and that is that's something that I was exposed to much early on through their songs and I was interested in learning Tirumantram. I heard about the book, but only in 2005, got this book with 3,000 poems. And those 3,000 poems were not, kind of, they are now translated into English by Hindu Monastery, by Himalayan Publications in the Kauai Monastery. So that is one of the kind of the basic things that I kind of started following for my practice, for my understanding of the Siddha philosophy, and the four channels of Sarya, Kriya, Yogam, and Jnanam. All the four principles are explained beautifully in that book. So within that, I came across the Pranayama chapter. Even though Patanjali and Tirumular are contemporaries, we know Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, but we didn't know much about Tirumantara in the yoga tradition. So I wanted to kind of go a little deeper into that and then understand what do they what does he talk about pranayama in it. So he has like 14 poems within the pranayama chapter and several other poems within throughout the whole text. uh, so pranayama is an important tool for all the four major pathways as I understand from it. So I kind of started working with one of the poems. That's where I started seeing salivary stimulation, and then continued that research, how things happen with uh, when once when we do the pranayama, what are the things that happen, how do we understand that through molecular pathways. Yeah, it's a long story, but
It's a
it's the way
beautiful
I,
story.
yeah.
And I think that, like sharing stories is very important because we have such an overload of information today. But to be able to digest information, to assimilate it, to be able to ponder it, traditionally, we've always used stories. It does something that, I'm sure someone is researching that, or hopefully
Yeah,
they are. It does something to us to forge a connection, and almost like an affinity for the practice or the wisdom because of how it's transmitted through story. So, yeah, please don't apologize for the long story. It's most welcome.
thank you. Yeah.
um, you kind of answered my question a little, but if you wanted to speak a little more about, most of our pranayam study in most yoga courses comes from the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. So, could you share, what would be the difference, or not really the difference, let's say, what would be the uniqueness? What's different about the way Tirumular looks at pranayam and in the way Svatmarama looks at pranayam?
So the important thing about pranayama from the perspective of Tirumular and several other siddhas is that the clear distinction of how they connect the breathing with what happens at the level of mind. So this is something even in the very opening poem itself, Tirumular talks about clearly talks about the horse being so you will see that symbolism of horse in the yoga tradition very very strongly, because that is the horse that carries the mind to all the different places. I would think about the allostatic load in the recent times. If you think about how the allostasis is kind of keeping the mind away from us, leaving the mind away from us, wandering mind, right? So that is where the source of stress is. And what Tirumantram and several other Siddha traditions talk about is the horse is the one that is to be tamed for the mind to be tamed. So we talk about the 36 tattvas. Tattvas are the how we are made up of. So this is strongly rooted in the Siddha philosophy, where the God or nature, however we call it, is that in itself is we are an embodiment of that through the Nada Vindu. So a lot of siddhas, including Arunagiri Nadar, they talk about Nada Vindu Kaladi Namo Nama. So Nada Vindu, and then they produce the Kalai. Kalai is the one that branches out all the nadis. So all these nadis, 72,000 nadis are there in the body. 10 major nadis are in the body. These are all like very well cited in the Siddha tradition. And how many are the Chandra Nadi, how many are the Surya Nadi? And these are the details, fine details, specifically spelled out in the Siddha tradition. That is where I was kind of referring to. And the taming of that horse, how the breathing is, and the very different calculated versions, like the inhalation, exhalation calculations, and the different minute details in the techniques, right? These are all found in Tirumantram and in the Siddha poems. Tirumantram for me is a representative of all the Siddha tradition because that's one of the prominent works. But there are several other minor works. I wouldn't say minor, several other works that are equally important, much less studied. If I say Tirumantram, at least there is a translation for it and people can refer to it. But the other Siddha poems, there is not much of translated work or scientific studies in it. And that is where I see that the way in which they that with philosophy, the way in which they connected with that oneness, that is where the Siddha tradition is, or the work of Tirumular is very, very unique. And the pathways, how they are kind of connected with the God, how they are related to the dance of Shiva, the cosmic dance of Shiva, we call, how you can see that through pranayama, how you can visualize that, the darshan, the vision of that can be, it is achievable by everybody, not not necessarily those sages in the forests, or even if we think now that vision is possible. And the practice of pranayama is very, very important in that respect. No other book gave me that much of a confidence, the assurance that you do this, you will see it. That is the type of link which is not possible in just spirituality or in the belief systems. There should be a rigorous scientific cause and effect system, mechanistic study. I see that Siddha tradition is highly mechanistic. You practice this, you will see it. So that is how, that's the rigorous scientific practice of
Wonderful. Um, I, I I love that you're sharing about the rigorous scientific practice, because I think for us today, after the falling of or our disappointments with religious organizations, with all of this, which is worldwide across all religious traditions, there's been a disconnection from the essence of where the practice is, or why the practice originated, and the energy that is ever present. And having people like you, doing this research is really helpful, because not like that is changing anything for the energy, it's changing everything for us, because it's making it more accessible. And I find also, my mother is a microbiologist, so I grew up also with that mindset. And when I started to experience the effects of pranayama, I couldn't make sense of it. Like, it was just out of this world, and there was no, I started looking up to see. This was years ago, before there was this much research, right? And I want to say one more thing, which is also, even for Indian people, because we have had a disconnection with our culture because of colonialism, and a very British education system. There was this disconnect with, like, this is just woo woo that grandparents do, or whatever, and you do it because you have to do it in the family. And because of work like yours and Dr. Tellis and so many other people, um, many people even from our own tradition are finding a way to be proud again, of their traditional culture and see the wisdom and the incredible science that in some ways is beyond what current medical science can prove. So this is incredible. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Um, I
I
wanted
wanted
to
to
ask
say
you.
just one thing there.
Mm-hmm.
In Tamil Nadu, though, ever since, even during the periods of colonialism, we had colleges like the traditional medical system, colleges for the medical system. The Siddha College has been there always. Siddha medical practice has been there always. So the in fact, the colonialism kind of opened up education for everyone, especially in our state. I would say that it is very important the cultural changes that we saw from the 1900s, like early 1900s, even before that, even in the 1800s itself. There was a lot of cultural changes and a lot of openness in the educational system. So education was previously for only a certain group of people. Only the privileged can go to school. They only can study. But during the I would say that Tamil Nadu has early on, much early on, like maybe if you go to the Sangam literature period, it's before Christ. So even during those periods, we had 40 women poets in the Sangam literature, 40 women poets. So even if you look at the Kiradi, there's a excavation, recent excavation going on in Kiradi, even talking about carbon nanofibers, and then scripts. So the scripts from the early on, people potters would write poetry. So that is how it was enriched. I mean, the education was very, very deep rooted. It was open to the everyone back there. And but later, later it was kind of confined to some sects. But what happened was during the British period, it was kind of liberated again. So that's how we were able to get the first generation immigrants. Like they were able to move to lots and lots of places because of the education. So there may be like it's a very sensitive topic to the criticisms, but this is the time of science, and it's been always the case. Like Swami Vivekananda tried to explain it to the world, but later we were able to kind of found that as a scientific practice. But like you said, it was not very well acceptable because we didn't have enough tools. Now we have the tools, so we have the ability to talk the language of scientists. So we'll be able to bring more studies, like Dr. Tellez, she's one of the pioneers, and more work will be done in the molecular aspects also. Please, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And it always comes to me, always these words, Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu. There's nothing to reject. Everything has its place, and we can't always see the full picture, but it's, you know, she knows, or however we connect what is happening and how it will unfold. Just before I ask the next question, not everyone may be familiar with what exactly Siddha medicine is. Maybe some are familiar with Ayurveda. Could you share, practically speaking, how we would understand Siddha medicine? Um, and would you say it's the same as Ayurveda, similar? I know it also works with the doshas and the panchatattvas, panchamahabhutas. So if you can just share for our audience.
Yeah, sure. I'm not a traditional, a licensed Siddha medical practitioner or educated with credentials, official credentials, even though I have a medicine cabinet with all the Siddha medicines. full of, I follow that. Siddha medicine is one of the very, very ancient forms of medicines. We start with leaves. So any treatment would start with the leaves, flowers, and then bark, and then finally the root. Root is one of the
Mm.
even for the small trees or small herbs, it's root. There is a very strong belief that we would not take a medicine if I were to kill a plant, if I were to kill a tree. If I were to kill a tree and survive, we won't take that medicine. That is the philosophy. Maram sa marundum kullar. So they won't take the medicine if they were to kill a tree. So that's how the Siddha medicine works. Use various principles, everything natural from the minerals and uh, shells, seashells, and any other like from the herbs. And the processes are very, very scientific. The way in which they make the medicine, detoxify, you would use mercury, but the way in which mercury is transformed will be kind of acceptable to the body, assimilated in the body without affecting the kidney. So people always are very, very about mercury. Oh, there's mercury metal poison. But the way in which the Siddha medical system treats those, purifies those, it is very, very, makes it non-toxic. So that's in a simple way. And a lot of these principles and the um, adjunct medicines, like what you have to the medicine, you can take in hot water, honey, or milk or butter. But depending upon what you're taking it with, it will change the quality and the destination. This you will also see with the carrier principles, like whatever may be the carrier, it'll take to the brain or stay in the alimentary canal, things like that. So this is also very important. The Mukkuna dosha, or three dosha, you Vada, Pitta, Kabam. We have a saying in Tirukural, another ancient literature. So the three doshas, whether it is increased or decreased, will cause disease. That's the basic rule. And the way in which we use the nadi sodhanai, right? So this is also very, very traditional. We have surgery in Siddha practice. There is a misconception that surgery is not part of the Siddha medicine. Siddha do use surgery, and the tools that we use are very, very well defined. So I would say Siddha is one of the very, very strong um, Indian medical systems. And there are several formulations that are not even present in Ayurveda. They are present in Siddha, and it is highly politicized when it comes to Ayurveda versus Siddha, because Tamil versus Sanskrit. This
Mm.
quarrel is always there, but I don't go deep into that. But there's whenever wherever there is a political power, that will be the prominent culture. So if the king is speaking Sanskrit, or the king is in support of the Sanskrit or Ayurveda, all there will be like a lot of support. Even today, there'll be support for the Ayurveda and everything, but not so much with Siddha. So that's the politics. And even for COVID-19, the Kabasura Kudir, everything is coming from the Siddha tradition, but the government wouldn't want to publicize that or accept it. They will call it as okay. They won't call it as Indian medicine. They will call okay. They wouldn't call it as Siddha medicine. They'll call, oh, the Indian medical practice has these things. What is wrong in accepting Siddha medicine system is good, and it cured more than 90% of the people. And people should be open-minded, scientific, looking at the truth, what is in the evidence, how do we accept it. And there's a lot of history behind it, and why some governments belief system want to suppress the others. Those are the things that's always there. But truth is one, and God knows the truth.
Yes, I agree with you. Just yesterday, I was having a conversation with a friend in India that, they shut down some Ayurvedic clinic where people were getting healed with, whatever, the doctor was giving.
That is the true
So,
example of colonial thinking. So where the
yes.
money is, that is where all the industries they will support, and rest of that, if there is not money, they won't care. Pranayama produces nitric oxide, but you want to produce nitric oxide in a canister, maybe you just give it as an inhaler.
Yeah, it's all capitalism. But
Yeah,
yeah, thank
yeah.
you for also, for you sharing this, because it's important. Our audience is from all over the world, and it's important for them also to understand how much is being navigated, to be able to present all of this information and this research. It's not a closed thing you're doing in a laboratory. There's so much of interaction over time, over with politics and capitalism, like everything. So it's good, it's good to have practical conversations too. Um, I wanted to ask, I'm going to ask mostly from Ayurveda, because though I'm familiar that Siddha existed, there wasn't much of it in Bombay. But in Ayurveda, we noticed that, like, dryness of the mouth shows that our, dosha is out of balance. And then we have certain, like, rasna pana kriya to trigger the sweet taste in the mouth, that establishes the prithvi tattva, and that shows like a cellular repair. um, can you share about, um, maybe if in the Siddha tradition, or just, what we can understand from pranayama and saliva, in
So
terms of from
there is
Siddha and from science,
Yeah.
Western
So there
science?
is I would say there are several Siddha traditional songs that are related to saliva. One of the important thing is that you have to look at the way the consistency of saliva. So the nadi, looking at the nadi, looking at the breathing, different nostril breathing, looking at the eyes, skin, nail, looking at the saliva, and then the urine. So everything has to be seen by the practitioner in diagnosing a disease or testing a patient. That is the thing in the Siddha tradition. Excuse me. And if you look back into the tradition, there's a siddhar called Idaikadar. Idaikadar talks about Idaikadar and Sivavakya. Both of them are talking specifically about saliva. And saliva is also said in many different ways, that it is called amrut or honey, nectar, and so many different ways. And the Idaikadar, he talks about specifically, he says Idaikadar is a person who's taking of cow herds. So he's a herd person. So in the same language, he'll say, okay, go and milk the cow. So that is the whole song. Vayal umirndirum palkara means go and uh, milk from your mouth. So it's basically that's what it is. It is what you spit. So he says what you spit is the milk. And this has several, he goes on adding several bits of it. So you keep your mind calm for life, for keeping the anger away, dousing off your anger or desires, for everything, go to that, get that milk. That's what he says. And then on the other side, there's Sivavakya. He calls everything is spit. So
Mhm.
the Madiranda Vindu Echil, Madiyum Echil, Oliyum Echil, Echil means spit. Edil Echil illadilla, illa illa illa. Where you don't have the spit. It's everything in this form of spit. Oduhindra Vedam Echil, the Vedas, all the Vedas are spit. Ulla Mandrangal Echil, all the mantras are spit. So it is all, which means that chanting, when you do chanting or singing, any type of kind of way of vocalization, they all have the connection with the salivation. So if you look into the poems that of another siddhar, Arunagiri, he put a lot of twisters inside his songs. முத்தை தருவத்தி திருநகை அத்திக்கிரை சத்தி சரவண முத்துவரை என போதும். So that's how he kind of composes his songs in a way that there's a lot of activation of the tongue within the oral cavity. What does it do? Basically, the vocalization stimulates salivation. And then the concepts within those songs. What do we talk within that song? Sometimes you will see all the snacks that Ganesh would eat, right? So, இக்கவரை நற்கனிகள் சர்க்கரை பருப்புடனே எள்பொரி அவல் துறவரை இளநீர். So he talks about everything. So when you think about that, all the laddu and everything, then salivation starts coming in again, right? So it also what goes inside are the deep devotion, the gratitude, thinking of the God, right? So everything can produce salivation. It is also the parasympathetic activation, right? So the thankfulness, the everything, it will also add to it. So spit has a very, very strong connection with the ancient Siddha tradition. And Tirumular also talks about it. That's where I was interested in when we do the exercise that is stimulated.
Mm.
And it is
You, ju-
it's part of the Kechari yoga also within the Tirumatra.
you just reminded me that when we were little, if we got hurt, our mothers would just say that just put some spit on it.
Yep,
That's
exactly.
what we
Exactly. Right.
and it's yeah. Like I never thought about it before, but as you said that, I'm like, yeah, that's what we used to do. You had
In
any kind of thing, you would put spit on
yeah,
it.
in Arabian culture, they have the camel spit. They have the similar tradition. So they have some saying that Prophet Muhammad Nabi's spit or was used in some healing. It's a traditional story, and it is there. Basically, it is there in all the culture. People from several ancient cultures have a special place for spit.
So, just going into the research aspect a little more, one of your research papers, I think it was in March 2015, is about alterations in salivary proteome following single 20-minute sessions of yogic breathing. Can you share about, what this study was about, and, what the findings were?
Yeah, Michael Janik, who's a very good colleague of mine. And when I was talking about my first paper with him, like about the salivary nerve growth factor study, he's a mass spectrometrist. He studies the proteomic analysis. He's a very good scientist in that area. So I was talking to him about, okay, when we do yoga or the pranayama, all these things happen in the saliva. He was like, really? He didn't believe, right? So I was talking with them. He used to work in the same field as I do. We used to talk a lot, and then one day he studied. Hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we study some of these, before and after saliva, and then study it in mass spectrometry? So that's how this study unfolded. And we compared the pre and post salivation. What we found was numerous proteins, like I would say more than 150 proteins were different. And we got, shortlisted based on their significance, only 22 different proteins. Of those 22 different proteins, we have the gene ontology, like what is the function of those proteins related to, whatever we know at that time in the literature. So we categorized them, and there are 8 different classes of immunoglobulins. So these immunoglobulins are part of the mucosal immune system. They could be part of the innate or the acquired immune response. And there were tumor suppressor molecules, and there were proteins that would be kind of hormones or the enzymes that could connect to lowering blood pressure, for example. So there are several other molecules that have the very good impact on your inflammatory response. So these are the changes. For example, if you look at the immunoglobulin molecules that are listed there, two of them, so the specific immunoglobulin variants, we have about 50 immunoglobulin genes within the body. Immunoglobulin heavy chain genes, like the variable heavy chain genes, are 50 of them. And so what recently there was a study showing what are the chains that are used predominantly in COVID infection. So they took blood from people all over the world, like UK and China, Taiwan, and so many other places. They used what are the prominent immunoglobulin heavy chain genes that are used for the COVID response, right? So they shortlisted 10 of them, and two of them are what we found. So what we found in here were used by the COVID response also, which means that same immunoglobulin gene can be stimulated, right? Can be expressed by the pranayama or the relaxation response techniques. And some of the proteins, like the tumor suppressors, there are also can be very, very important in terms of their markers. They can be biomarkers in understanding how the tumor is vigorous, like the biomarkers. For example, there's this protein called the DMBT1, deleted in malignant brain tumors 1, which is a protein removed or deleted in brain tumors. That's how they discovered it first, because those tumor suppressors are needed for the tumor to be suppressed. And what happens as the tumor grows, selectively, cells that have this DMBT are removed, deleted. So the clone will be without the tumor clone will be progressing or growing without this particular gene. So this is one of deletion is one of the ways in which the tumor can progress very well. So we need these tumor suppressors. What we found was that we stimulate these tumor suppressors when we do the pranayama. And these are all very important in oral immunity. So, the innate immune system, the oral and nasal passage, the mucosal pathway is important all over the body. It's important for the microbes to get in. So, if we have the immunity stronger, we'll be able to get rid of some of these neutralizing, ability. Like we can get rid of these pathogens. Does it make sense?
Wonderful. Absolutely. Yeah, it makes sense to me. And, even in Hatha Yoga Pradipika, for example, it says that pranayam can destroy things of generations. It can, just so much it can actually. So, what you're saying is actually that. And I'm also curious about the subjects for the study. Were these people that were practicing pranayam for a long time, or is it just that they were just initiated for the purpose of the
Yeah,
um
they are just commoners. So none of them know what pranayama is. Like maybe one person
hmm,
might be knowing what pranayama, but none of them knew this particular practice. So they didn't
right,
know the Tirumular pranayama. No.
which makes it even more significant because it could not be influenced by their belief system, or because though that also changes the way we respond to things and what is produced in the body.
Yeah.
And it also makes me think, the ones that they found for COVID and that they didn't were not in your list, it doesn't mean they don't exist. I feel also that the practice of pranayam gets more and more subtle as the nadis get purified, as our concentration deepens, our belief through the experience of the results that we internally experience, not necessarily like I've never measured what has happened to my body, but and that would possibly, would you say, you know, have different results with different people that might be practicing more deeply. I don't want to say for longer because it depends on the level of concentration awareness, etc., technique, might be having more of these, right?
Yeah, yeah. So the interoception, that is what is the most important thing. Like how that's the awareness or the belief. When you said that belief, that's how I understood interpreted it. So the mindfulness of the practice, how mindful are we, how aware are we with the flow of the breath. So these are all the things that will change the experience. These are all the, what do we think about when we do the breathing exercise? What kind of the chant might be, kind of changing the perception, right? So everything
Mm.
will make a difference. And the novelty factor. So okay, I'm doing something new, and this is very interesting, I'm doing it, right? So that's how that also might influence what we produce by seasoned practice. That's how the sadhana is very, very important. Like you have to do the practices regularly, and you know um, 3 times, 5 times, whatever maybe the number of times. This also follows a biological rhythm, like just like our feeding and fasting cycle. We also have like the circadian rhythm, ultradian rhythm, very small cycles lasting for 2 to 4 hours. Those rhythms are also in place. They also can interact with many of these factors, and these factors are produced as part of the rhythm as well. So everything is very, very closely connected, and it's fascinating to see how the awareness of the breath is connected with many of these mechanisms. Is really amazing.
Yes, and thank you for sharing about, all of these rhythms, because usually we do pranayama at every sandhya, like when there's a transition, you would do that. And when you're sharing about, I'm not familiar with the ultradian, did you say rhythms?
Ultradian rhythm, yeah, the
Yeah.
ultradian rhythm is it's a shorter rhythms. So it'll be like 2 hours in somewhere around 2 hours. So that is the rhythm that will change
Mm,
some of the biochemicals. So this is also
yeah.
very.
And when we study pranayama, we're told that that's why it's, every 90 minutes or 75
Yeah,
minutes, that
nasal
cycle
nasal
through the
cycle.
nostril
Yeah.
changes. And then there's also based on where the moon is, which nostril is predominant. And I've been actually make notes when I wake up of what I notice, just for my own, there's my own little study, not for anything, but just
Yeah.
to fine tune and understand my, like, I like the rational aspect as well. So it's good to have someone with us, as knowledgeable and scientific as you, sort of corroborate that um, and share how fascinating it really is.
Tirumular talks about one specific thing. It's called Varasaram. That talks about the cycles, right? So வெள்ளி வெண்திங்கள் விலங்கு புதனிடம் புள்ளிய மந்தன் ரவி செவ்வாய் வலம். So which means like specific days. What are all the left nostril, right nostril? So very
Yeah.
interesting.
um, so far, most of the research in pranayam has been done on, things like the effects on blood pressure, on vagal tone. Um, your study, with the nerve growth hormone and salivary immunoproteins, I think it's changed the trajectory to me as a yoga practitioner, at least. It's changed the trajectory of research from, I think to make it more specific and more easily accessible as well. You don't have to draw blood, or you don't, like, it's not an invasive, procedure. Can you share what do you feel this means for further research on pranayam? Like, where do you see the trajectory of this biochemical sort of research on pranayam going?
Yeah. So initially we were all like looking at physiological parameters like blood pressure, body temperature, all those. These are all very important. Don't get me wrong. These are all very important changes that are happening in the body as a response to um, these exercises. But there are like even earlier indications that it is not necessarily the blood gas changes altered during the pranayama. There are neural elements. So people like Jagat and his earlier articles mentioned that, okay, this is not just the blood gas. This is not just the body temperature. Sometimes we think that, oh, the cooling breath is, it's not actually cooling breath. It is going to warm you up. So these are the ways in which we can use physiological parameters. But there are more and more interest in omic studies like the proteomics, lipidomics, and genomics. All those omic studies are now the important tools. These are all the markers that we need to understand at the molecular level. What happens at the molecular level to see the changes in epigenetic level. So maybe these exercises are changing some gene expression in terms of methylation or any other ways, right? And then also like how these enzymes will be useful in reducing blood pressure. All these subtle changes are very very quick changes, and they can be easily studied in saliva rather than blood. So the blood changes are there. It might take hours and hours to kind of see some level of change in there. It is not necessarily specific to what happens just with the pranayama alone, whereas the saliva is an evolutionarily important fluid that is very responsive to changes in the way you breathe, the way whatever you see, what you talk, and whatever you do, right? Very responsive to changes. Like the salivation is very, very responsive. You can measure many of the things that goes on in the body with the salivary principles. Say, if you produce a more cortisol or more amount of melatonin or anything like oxytocin, say, related to our emotional well-being or the physical well-being can be related to salivation. And you also, not necessarily for pranayama, it is also useful in many other mind body practices. You can take this to tai chi or qigong, even postural yoga, massage therapy. Can use it in any different the intervention to study what changes and the system. So this is one of the important ways to understand some of the factors that we produce in the saliva, so do see in the saliva. They are part of the overall the mucosal system, the nervous system specifically. Whatever the some of the things that you will find are common in tears, in cerebrospinal fluid, in breast milk, in the alimentary canal, right? All these things are kind of present in the saliva. There are, in cancer biology, there are over 1,166 proteins cataloged for as potential markers that you can study in the saliva. And salivomics is another way of understanding what happens in saliva. We don't know the metabolites. So it's a small molecular weight compound still. We did a small study with the lipid changes, and it's again it's very interesting one. We haven't yet published it, but there are other small molecular weight compounds. Say for example, nitric oxide or other exhaled molecules, they organic compounds. They also can be very very important in understanding the metabolic changes with respect to the breathing exercises.
Wonderful. As you were saying all of this, I think like my system is like all the bugs are on. uh, I was remembering one other thing. I have a 9-year-old, and when she was born, she had a tongue anomaly. Like she had a posterior tongue tie that was not visible. So anyway, we went through a big journey to be able to nurse her, and it actually got published in a medical journal because we used yogic techniques and not general anesthesia and all of this, which got me very interested in lactation, saliva, oral, myofascial, uh, the way that we can modify that, and the palate and all of these things. And I just wanted to say, maybe for the listeners, that one of the things that I learned was that based on the saliva of the baby as it touches the nipple, it sends information to the brain on exactly what composition of whether it's antibodies or like whatever needs to be produced at that time for the baby. So, there's a lot of, again, because of, practicality, also because of marketing about pumping milk, and there's something that is lost there. I'm not saying it's not something to do, if that's the situation, but the saliva and that instant contact, and
Yeah.
the body is like it's doing a lab test there, right there, and saying, okay, now let's like make this. And I was so fascinated when I learned that.
Yeah.
Like
I
it's just, and also, sorry, I want to say one more thing is, when we traditionally, when you're nursing a baby, you're singing or you're chanting, and I was always chanting because, initially it was so excruciatingly painful till we discovered what
yeah.
was wrong, that I had to chant to like be sane. And what it does is activates the vagal tone, it changes the saliva, it helps oxytocin and the letdown of, milk. And so I just wanted to share that the, the pranayam practice that we
Yeah.
do in sadhana is not separate from life, it applies to everything. Sorry,
Yeah.
you were going to say something.
Thank you for sharing. This is similar experiences that I hear from a lot of our students, that some say that, okay, the practice of pranayama helps me to pump more milk. And also, so this is traditionally, you can go back to our tradition, like the lullaby, singing lullaby is not, it's talata. Talata is like moving the tongue. And parasympathetic activation is not just the salivation, lacrimation, urination, digestion, defecation. It is also lactation. People don't put it in the medical books, right? The lactation is also important in expression of the parasympathetic tone. That's why all the lullabies would be, related to the mother's side. The mother will be singing lullabies, thinking about her family, her brother, her mother, her village. Everything is related to what suits her. And this is an important way of even, putting the postpartum depression. So this is an important thing. So this is also like improves the bonding between the child and the mother. Thank you for sharing it. This kind of similar thing. I always say that people say, okay, I'm concerned that we shouldn't be practicing pranayama during pregnancy. Said, no, pregnancy is the time you should practice. It is the time that you should start working with your breath. That will help with during the labor and beyond, like taking care of your baby, depression that might follow. These are all very important, right? So the pranayama practice is for everyone that breathes.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And thank you for saying that, because it's true. Like I was actually high during labor. Like my Agni chakra it was amazing. It was also uncomfortable, but it was amazing. And birthing is apana vayu. So the more that we become familiar with being able to, just like we have a sense of what friend is going to come, or what perfume someone wears, you get a sense, you as you practice, we get the sense of where the vayu, like the prana, is moving in the body. And it gives us so much trust in our body and prana as this very, I mean, if you've never birthed before, you have no clue what to expect. um but and information is one thing, but having a relationship with how prana moves, and then having a trust with it because of a past relationship with it, empowers us so deeply during birthing. And birthing is a birthright for the child, it is the
You guys
original
are
birthright.
very fortunate to have that, right? Yeah.
Yes. um, One more question about, you spoke about epigenetics. This is a very fascinating topic for me, and I am absolutely sure, though no tests have been done on me, that there have been huge epigenetic changes in my system from the practice of pranayama. And there are many verses in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika that allude to that as well, in terms of changing the karmas of the past, in terms of being the practice for moksha. And when we think of moksha, we think of, in a practical way, we could think of or we're clearing the nadis, right? We're taking off the vasanas, the samskaras, we're like clearing the blockages. So we're taking out those epigenetic, maybe this is my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, the markers that would interfere with this feeling of harmony, compassion, non-separation. um, how would you, how would you relate pranayama and epigenetics? Just, I know there hasn't been that much research, but what would be a hypothesis that you might have?
Yeah, so there's not much research with related to the epigenetic changes in with respect to pranayama, but there is always that I see this as a continuation, continuous production of toxic metabolites in the body and how we eliminate them. They have a very strong connection with how our genes get imprinted for expression. So these level of I would say the toxic metabolites are the one that is kind of cranking us. So the you know spinning the cycle of a cell quite fast is that's what happens in cancer. So normal cell cycle is very slow and may take 4 or 5 days for say a cell to kind of cycle. Can when it becomes cancerous, it spins faster, like maybe 1 to 2 days. It produces new cells. So it
Mm.
is important to kind of have a regulation on that cell cycle, the regulation on the way in which we move. So there's a beautiful saying in the Saiva Siddhanta, Vegam Keduttanda Vendanadi Velka, which means that the Shiva, reduces the speed within me. So the speed is, it could be rage, anger, or anything that is kind of a sign. How do we do that? That is through the breathing practices. The pranayama can reduce that rage, the anger, and our ability to control the emotions. And then that in itself is a way of lot of epigenetic changes that is related to cell cycle. So the we can we can measure that in the saliva or in the blood, those markers that could be related to the how different emotions would change that cell cycle, activating markers that are related to methylation, or it could be the other way is that how we are able to remove those impurities in a constant manner. That is where the regular practice comes in. So he says, so every cell population will have that many number of divisions, have like a 50 divisions or 100 divisions. After that, the cells will become senescent. They will not divide. They will stop dividing. They'll just be there and die. So that is the type of that is how we kind of age. So the aging process is through that senescent, because the faster we spin the cycle, the faster we will finish the number of cycles. That it's like a
Mhm.
back balance, right? So you spend it fast, you're gone. It's it that the number of so this is how the Siddha tradition relates to the breathing also. We breathe 21,600 times a day. And the slower you breathe, you keep that breath longer. That is connected to the way you can activate or deactivate the metabolic activities. There are pranayama to slow down the metabolic activities. Very simple, right? So these are the ways in which you can kind of study that, okay, how the slow breathing pranayama techniques slow down the cell cycle through possible changes in the epigenetic control, and also through detoxification. So removing the toxic metabolites, or removing cells with impurities, cells with misformed proteins. So there are methods like autophagy is one of the ways in which we can remove the misfolded proteins, remove the proteins that are not needed. So this could be activated to remove the cell cycle proteins that are cranking up, so we can hold them back. We don't need that, right? So it's a stationary way of keeping things in a very balanced state for a longer time. So there's one whole umbrella here. So you can it relates to the you get up early in the morning and remove the marsh, that is the debris or the toxins early in the morning, and you will live as a bala, like a baby. And
Mhm.
this I say this um, on I promise on Lord Shiva and Shakti. That's what he says.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I have just two more questions. Um, One thing I'm curious about is when I read all the scientific papers that have been done, whether in India or in the West, research on pranayama or any yogic practices, something feels like it's missing for me in the sense that, from a perspective of Ayurveda, which we always work with together with yoga, they go together. We don't see a subject as uniform, or the doshas are so important to the way that we would tell somebody to do a pranayam practice if we're going deeper, right? If someone's vata is aggravated, kapalbhati is not a pranayam, but we would not tell them to do kapalbhati because it will create more dryness. um, but in these experiments, those factors, which are very much part of the person, right? Like the dosha is there, like um, undeniably part of how we respond. Um, I'm missing. I'm wondering if there might be a way to integrate. So what Western science might not find, an Ayurvedic, Ayurveda has found, or Siddha has found. What would be a meeting ground, if at all, to be able to do these studies so that these considerations um, are taken into consideration in the study? Because, for example, some study showed that Surya Bheda pranayam does not increase the heat in the body. But as a practitioner, it's like, hello, I'm definitely feeling it. So I'm just curious. I don't have any answers or intelligence around it, but I'm curious to know what your thoughts might be.
Yeah. So I think the one of the things that many pranayama studies don't take into account is the type of the person. Even though I have some other thoughts with the ascribing a person to a vata or pitta, the kapha person, it's a combination of three, and the domination of
Mhm.
one or the other during all throughout the day. So it is
Right.
that you may be the vata one in the morning, and then not necessarily in the afternoon. So
Yeah.
it is the
Prakriti and
changing, right? So
Nivriti.
the
Yeah.
change is um, kind of very much related to how you will feel, or how you will respond to an exercise. So that's why we have to have, just like in the traditional system, the science system, if you have to do cortisol measurement, you have to do that before 30 minutes before waking up, or just even without waking up, you have to collect saliva. That's one. So in the similar way, if you were to do some of these experiments, it has to be done at a specific time. So this has to be noted. Like these exercises were done in this time, and that may be another way of adding. So I have some kind of procedures kind of being set up in that manner, being studied to see that in a systematic way to kind of do the timestamps and so on. So it is very important to take into consideration of what that basic type of that person at that particular time, and then what the expression is. Definitely we have to um, take those into account, and it's very much related to breathing. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
know that we have some future studies being set up in that direction. We'll be able to provide some more light on that, hopefully.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm so happy to hear this. I
Yeah, yeah.
really, really am so happy to hear you're doing this. And my last question really is, there's in the name of science being sort of like the new religion, there's a lot of traditional practices, including pranayam, that are being taken out of the context of the system in which I don't even want to say system because system can be a problematic word as well. The wholeness of what they are meant to do, um, and rebranded by people using their name, or cardiac coherence breathing, or just there's just so much around there. um, as someone in the science field, how do you feel about um, you know about 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 this? Because there's the aspect, even with, sometimes, like, because I try to process it as well. And I say maybe it makes things more accessible to people, because how are they going to say even pranayam? People find it hard to say the word.
Yeah.
So how are they going to say it, or how are they going to relate to it if they think it's from a religion, which it's not? But so then maybe they make it more accessible in one way, but at the same time there's a lot of profiting happening from that, and if it comes with a stamp of a doctor, it just attracts more money, because a doctor said the yoga teacher can say. But so I'm just curious about, because you're so rooted in both, and that's a wonderful thing. How do you feel, about this?
I feel that science belongs to people, right? So the practices belong to people, everyone. As there should be democratization in every single the system. Originally, the Siddha tradition is very democratic. They would teach to anyone and everyone. They will be like teaching at the temples, practicing at temples, and telling everyone. So he will say that I will teach it to everyone who has the sense to accept, understand, or want it. Whoever wants it. That's how Tirumular says. உள்ளது சொன்னோம் உணர்வுடையோர்க்கே. That's it. Whoever has that feeling, that urge to learn, we say that. Okay, and it is also. But later, what happened was that it became kind of secluded to some groups, and they wouldn't teach to everyone. And it is kind of it's a practice of some obscure ways that. And even now, the modern day Swamijis, they don't teach to everyone. They will teach after like making big money, in names of donations. It's not. I'm not talking about the our friend yoga teachers next in the next door street, maybe like charging $5 for pranayama session, which is nothing. But there are like a big branded swamijis and gurujis, and they will be like charging thousands of dollars for a very very basic pranayama course. Like I've heard this from so many, experienced it from so many sources, that they use the name of religion, they use the name of guru sthana, that they misuse that, and then gain a lot of money through that. I would say that science is the way to kind of popularize it, democratize it, and there is nothing wrong in kind of um, opening this up to everyone. In some cases, even the publications, scientific publications, should ask for a specific how do they do that exercise. Say if I say Tirumular Pranayama, I publish that, means that this is the length of inhalation, this is the length of holding, this is the length of exhalation. But you cannot just say some name and then this was a registered practice by such and such Swamijis. It's available to their disciples and it's part of the. That's not scientific practice. You cannot publish that. And then there should be more rigorous openness in the scientific literature about their exercises, practices, and compare that where that comes from. and what is that related to. You and they change the names. Like sometimes they change the names of ancient traditions, ancient techniques, and the swamis and gurujis change the names, and as if it belongs to their brand. So I don't want to say any name here, but there are people doing that, right? And but at the same time, the same similar exercises will be maybe derived from the yoga tradition or maybe derived from some other tradition. People use those exercises, say box breathing or fast exhalation type of methods, right? I don't want again say things like here names here, and people use that, not quoting that this is from the yoga tradition, and it is one way of opening it out. So I welcome everything that everyone who's interested in studying, in teaching, to say the source. Where did you take that from? Which tradition did you take it from? Just put a source, or you found it yourself. Just say it out. So I devised this method based on my own so you say, then say how it works and how it is being done. So that is the true way of democratizing, these methods. These methods are from scientists, from saints. Saints are those siddhars, I call them. They are the ancient scientists. They produced these methods for people, and nobody has a right to take them out and then put it away and then give sell it for the, their own benefits. So if you look at my second book, it's Mind Your Breathing with 37 pranayama exercises. As you probably know, there is no book that I know of with that many exercises from the tradition, modified, and something that I discovered on my own, and from related to some Siddha methods, Siddha literature. So I quoted that. If this is from Karur Sittar's poem, I quote that. This is based on Karur Sittar's Pranayama. So I named that Karur or Pranayama. So if I'm a small person, like I have another volume coming up. So if I can put 37 pranayama exercises out for people, if people know a lot more pranayama exercises in their schools, put it out. Let it be tested by scientists. Let it be followed by people who are in need, like mothers, like people who are having problems. Like let them use it. Why do you, you know, uh, code it? That's my way, and it needs to be democratized, and it is a science that is not kind of democratic is not a truthful science.
Mm, thank you for sharing that. And also, you know, sitting in the West, we have a lot of conversations about how West, there's sorts of section, but it's happening in India too. You're right. Like people are rebranding the traditional
I know
pranayama.
I said so many things that could be controversial for
No, it's
your audience, but I'm fine to talk more on this.
yeah, yeah. We need to speak about it for sure. And you know, I just want to say one thing is that many of the practices also to me were given by my teachers when they thought I was ready. And I didn't understand it when I was younger because I was like, but I'm doing it and I'm doing it every day. So why am I not ready for the next level? Like I'm healthy and I'm doing my sadhana every day. And, there was like, is it, why? And I realized that when there's a readiness, just like we have a developmental readiness to be able to write or to be able to crawl, or there's also a spiritual readiness sometimes. And I just want to bring that point because sometimes the true teachers are not withholding because they don't want to give, but because we are not yet ready. And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with us or that it's not, or with them. It's just that especially with prana, you can like short circuit the system if we don't know what we're doing and just randomly kind of practicing anything. So, yeah, I mean, that's being misused definitely, but there's still, I just wanted to bring that
Yeah. That
knowledge of, there is a time and a space also sometimes for things, and that's probably why sometimes it's a matter of our discernment, viveka around it.
yeah,
So
Tirumantram and the Siddha literature is it's a perfect example of it. It is out there. It is there. It's always been there. But when are we ready to understand it? Right? It is there. But my way is that put it out there. When a person is ready, they will understand. That's how it should be. It's not like the decision of the guru. Okay, it is not the decision of when you are ready, I will give it to you. Is one way. I would suggest that um, we should have the access to the knowledge, and when we are ready to understand, it will be revealed to us. That's the nature's how we are reaching out. So if you look at that, if you go to the library, think about a librarian, right? So he says, okay, when you're ready, I'll give you the book, right? So if you think about it, it's not the right way of running a library. So all the books are here. You just grow up. You see
mm,
your own evolution, and the librarian can suggest, okay, since you have been reading all these books, you may be interested in that book now, right? So or you may
mm.
be able to understand that now. So they can show. That should be the way the guru should be. That it's not
That's
that.
a fabulous it's such a practical,
Yeah.
like, that's wonderful. Thank you for
Uh,
that example. um is there anything you want to say to the audience about, like, our viewers, about practicing pranayama, or any wisdom that you want to leave them with?
Um, yeah, I mean, thank you for having me. That's definitely it's a very nice conversation. I was thinking to talk for 1 hour. It's been 1.5 hours. The time flies. Thank you so much. And definitely practice. Practice is the knowing a pranayama exercise is not doing it. It's like I know how to walk, but do I walk? That's a simple way of putting it. Practice it regularly. That will have a very clear impact in your life, both at the mind and the body level. The pranayama is one of the best practices, the easiest and the least expensive practices. You can do it anywhere, anytime, and try it and follow it. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Wonderful. Nice
much
talking with
for
you. Bye
everything.
bye.